welcome to episode 413 of This is Whole Life. Together we dig deeper into each message each week, and we learn to love God a little bit better and a little bit more together, which kind of goes along with what's happening here this past week. What we're going to be talking about, small communities. It sounds better if you say small.
If you say it quietly.
Yeah, small communities. Because then people are like, wait a minute, why is it small? Well, you'll find out why it's small. And, that conversation always includes you, if you would like, every week, wholelife.church/live at 9:30 a.m. and 12 p.m. You can join a really cool group of y'all in the chat. And that's where most of our questions come from. However, podcast@wholelife.church is some of our favorite people like to utilize that, which is also happening today, or text 407-965-1607. So, a couple things to get started. Baptisms. Is it just me, or are we baptizing a lot of people? Every week or every other week, there's if we were to spread it out over the course of the year, right?
Right.
We did what, 7 at church retreat.
7. Yeah.
Emily was 8. This week was 9.
We had the Maynard sisters.
Yeah. So that's 10, 11.
So we've had 11 baptisms so far this year, and we've had what we call 2 professions of faith, which is somebody who's been baptized already but wants to join our denomination. And then I think we've had we've had pretty close to 20 folks just coming into our church from another church.
We had 10 this week.
Yeah.
10. That was Melanie, did you make the graphic for that?
I did.
That was beautiful. I like
it. Looked very nice.
The colors and stuff. I think we need to keep that one.
You like it?
So far, out of all I've seen, we love you, Tammy. But that was the happiest. I saw it come across my screen. I was like, well, that's really nice.
I used the cheerful colors.
Yeah, all the colors. It was great. 10 plus people this week, or was it 10? That was crazy. So things are happening here is my point. And when you put this many people together, obviously we're looking to come together, be together, do more together. Small communities, stick around for the rest of the story.
And I guess we should this is a great time just to say, if you're wanting to get baptized or transfer your membership in or something like that, go to wholelife.church
/connect.
/connect. Is that
That's the one.
That's the one. So
That's it.
wholelife.church /connect, and we'll make sure that we follow up with you.
And there's a great little button on the top of the menu bar that says I'm new. You can get there from there as well.
Okay.
So just in case, if you're not into I forgot what Pastor Ken said. Oh, Pastor Ken, sorry. I forgot what Ken
I'm
said.
just Ken.
Just Ken.
Just Ken.
And if you haven't seen that yet, please go to our social medias and laugh with us. Thank you very much. Lots of time and talent and treasure went into the making. All right. So we got an email this week, and I know you're going to know who it is, so I'm not going to say it right away. But here's the start. I've been catching up on the podcasts and the services online. Here's my take. Number 1, the church retreat podcasts. Oh my, I wish I could have been at church retreat in person, if just for the food alone. But to hear John Rivers' take on how to do business in a socially responsible Christian community-centric manner warmed my heart. Love the fact that Whole Life, Church Without Walls, found a businessman who runs a business without walls, at least in the context of all the good work Four Rivers Smokehouse is doing in Florida. And John gets points in my book for tasting those veggie meat samples. Brave man, to say the least. Overall, having him there was perfect synergy, or perhaps it was Kenergy.
Oh, I see what
nice
happened there.
I can smell what you're cooking.
Yeah.
All right.
On point.
Okay, that's point 1. Point 2, the God's Use of Power podcast. I'm going to paraphrase what Elder Ron Smith said about fulfilling the gospel commission. In short, the mission of the church is outward, to serve an instrument of God's mission of saving souls. I loved how he placed such an emphasis on the fact that we have to get out of our comfort zone to save souls and not play it safe. And I would like to clarify that I needed to hear that because I am all about playing it safe. More on that later. Such a charge reminds me of what the late civil rights icon John Lewis said, "Get in good trouble, necessary trouble, and redeem the soul of America." I guess what I heard was get in good trouble for God, necessary trouble for God, and let God use you to redeem the souls of your fellow members of humanity. Maybe I'm wrong in thinking that and taking such creativity license, but that's just how the podcast made me feel. And yes, it is absolutely like jumping out of or being pushed out of a perfectly good airplane when you really don't have to.
There we go.
I think we know who this is now.
Hey, Carolina Dave.
Hey. Number 3, the small community sermon. Oh, boy. For all the pontificating I just did about the previous subject, I feel like an absolute hypocrite for what I'm about to say about the whole concept of small community. So here we go. You ready?
Let's do it.
Oh, in parentheses, deep breath, putting on brave face. Okay, here we go.
Wow, do we need to do that too?
Maybe. I haven't read this all the way through. It's full of surprises. The idea of being part of a small community terrifies me. So much so that I would rather jump out of a plane to go skydiving. And I know online WLC members,
I'd like to put that to the test, Carolina Dave. I would like to say...
Challenge accepted.
You get to pick between the two, and I'm going to go with you're going to go with small communities. I know you well enough. I feel quite safe saying Carolina Dave will go with the small community, even though I recognize what he's saying. I believe him that he doesn't,
Well, Carolina Dave, I'll sweeten the pot with a trip to Four Rivers and your choice of what's on the menu if you do the plane route. So anyway.
So if you live to get it.
I didn't say life wasn't worth some chances here, taking some chances. So I shall endeavor to do so, being a part of a small community. But let me tell you, it is daunting for an introvert. And I will have to interact and be accountable. And if it's a small community, that means your actions are much more noticeable. But I shall try because I think this is part of God's plan to save souls. I don't know how I'll proceed, but we'll see what happens. I got to give Ken points for preaching on this. For an introvert, that was a brave thing for him to do. But Ken is one of the bravest people I know, which is why he would jump out of a plane. I could go on for a while as to why I think so, but I'll just leave it at this. That's just Ken. Just Ken.
Wow.
The points.
Dave really got on the I'm just Ken.
I feel like we need one of those tally dings every time there's a reference.
Maybe the cash register. That sounds good. As always, you and the rest of the Whole Life staff and family are in my prayers. Can't wait to hear this week's podcast. Well, Dave, we're already started and you've had a integral part of the first couple minutes.
Although I have to say, Dave, I feel you because as an introvert myself, what is it, that meme that I saw recently? Introverts unite separately in your own homes. Some of us who are introverts talk to ourselves and would like to think that's a small group.
And let's talk about it later, but
really,
not now.
It really is not. But
the funny thing is know Melanie, I know you, I know Dave, and both of you have friend groups that you spend time with.
It's true.
And you have your small communities. And I think that maybe the less daunting way of looking at small communities is to understand that it truly isn't asking you necessarily, although you can, to go to a whole group of people that you don't know. It's just asking you to think about how you can find a small community of people that you can do life together with.
That's true. And it is nice when you find somebody who gets you in that particular way. And honestly, as an introvert, there are people who run my battery down faster, and then there are other people who, like, my battery stays pretty steady, so I mean, it does also depend on who you're with.
There it is.
You do the battery analogy as well?
I do the battery. Yes.
Emily, that's why she's like, Daddy, battery's low.
Oh,
battery's low.
I feel you too, Emily.
So I get that. That's a big thing around our house. Okay. So in the course of this message, we asked you a question, whether you were participating here at Whole Life Church in one of the seats in the worship center, or whether you were online. We had 668 responses, which I believe might be a record for any Mentee we've ever done over 2 services. And the question was, why are you part of a church? And first off, whoever dropped the Easter egg in there of your little the queen with the crown emoji as your answer, I was trying to scratch something off my screen.
Are you going to put that? Are you going to put that? Are you going to put that somewhere where our podcast people can see it?
Yeah. We're gonna share this one because I think it's worth noting on social media. Just this is a conversation starter that I think would be beneficial to anyone that might just stumble across it. And I think early on, this was, I believe, in first service, and Ken was like, man, guys, I don't see spiritual growth happening here yet. I don't see a couple of the other ones. And then later on, after second service, it became pretty prominent here as we're looking at the looking at the final word cloud. But community, Jesus, family, fellowship, connection, support.
But I think the interesting thing is to look at this, and community is in the word cloud. That was the one that got the most people putting that in. So community is huge there. But think about all the other words that if you're listening to this and you get a chance to look at it, when you look at it, what you'll really realize is how many of those words have to do with community and relationship. They're synonyms. They feed into that word. Like I'm looking at one that says power in numbers. That's part of a community. That's friendship, belonging. These are all things that have to do with community. And as I was thinking about it, because I was thinking, why are you part of a church? Because I want to know God better. Well, you can do that on your own. You can spend time with God on your own. You can read your Bible. You can pray. And what I would also argue to you is one of the best ways to get to know God better is to do it in a group, in community with people around you. You need other people. And so there's something pretty important, I think, about that community, that group of people that you surround yourself with, that you do things with. I think it just makes a huge difference. And I think that when we look for church, it really does come down to relationships and to community.
Yeah, and thinking in terms of getting to know God better, no single one of us is the image of God. The image of God is reflected in all the diversity of people. And so if you want to see God differently, you can see God reflected in the faces of a lot of different kinds of people.
And I think the other part of it is, I think any of us, you really, when you tend to grow the most spiritually is when you're around people that are challenging you, that see God in a different way than maybe you've seen God before. It's, the story of the blind around an elephant. Each one, the elephant is huge. Each person feels a part of the elephant, and they have this idea of what the elephant is based on what part of the elephant they're touching. But no one has a complete picture by themselves, and you need other people to share their perspectives. And it's one of my favorite things is, like, you hear a speaker who really has spent time with God, and you see God in a different way. You're like, oh, I never thought about it that way. I've read that text 100 times, but I've never seen it in that light until you added the perspective that you've seen it in, or that you've studied it through. And I just love those moments.
That was when I had written down too, was just our perspective. Like you said, Melanie, we're not one of us is just the image of God. We all are. And so it only makes sense when you're thinking about, oh man, I never have thought about it that way. The second one is, I was looking at at this chart. I looked at belonging and encouragement, participation, and acceptance, which aren't maybe the huge, but those are things that, I'm just thinking acceptance. We've talked on the podcast many times about maybe what our internal self-talk is or isn't, or what it maybe could be, should be, we dream of it being. And belonging, it's hard to belong to yourself. And the other one I really liked was tradition, because I think that also goes along with when we first moved to Florida, we were a part of a small group of just a Friday night Bible study, and that went on for 3, maybe 4 years before someone moved. Then you know what happens, right? It's a small group. People get together. Some had kids. Heather and I were the dinks of the group. We didn't have any kids. So everyone was like, oh, you guys can go wherever we always had to travel. It was never at our house because we didn't have kids to, put down and sleep while the rest of us had Bible study. But that was the challenge when you move, especially when you move from somewhere and you're looking for the norms, you're looking for what's happening in this community of faith. Nowhere do you find that more so than maybe in someone's home, or when you're together and there's a small community of people that are all sharing, and you start to hear things that you've never heard before, and you're like, wait a minute, that is totally against what I'm pretty sure I believe. And then after you think about it and go, man, this person is really connected in a way in this area that I've never thought about. So those were a couple of the ones that I thought about, because I think we all go through times where, like, I don't need this. I think Stanley mentioned it during Q&A. I was like, man, I can barely have enough time for my wife and my kids. I mean, that's my tribe. How can I have time for all the rest of it? And yet there's so much more to be gained by just having that extra little bit of connection. Robin Dunbar, correct or incorrect? 150 is the big number.
If you're asking my own personal opinion, I think that his science is not the way that he came up with it. I'm a little bit suspicious of.
But there was an attempt made.
But there was an attempt made, and I think it's, if nothing else, just a great conversation starter, right? But I think, I think that anytime you try to take and say, I'm going to apply one thing across all humanity, you run into some, it's just like saying everybody loves pizza. Everybody should love pizza,
of course,
but not everybody does. And I think 150, and I think Robin, in some of the things I read, I don't think he was ever trying to lock it down, saying it's 150. But I think he was trying to say, in general, that's the number of relationships that can be maintained. But from my viewpoint, that number is really high.
I just want to know how many other people were sitting in the chair during church, going, "Let's see, 1, 2, 3."
According to the chat,
I have 2 children. I've got a spouse. I have 2 parents. 4 cousins. Man, I'm feeling tired already.
I don't know if I got the. Yeah. Well, here let's go to the comments.
Well, one of the funny things about there was actually I want to say it was I think it was a Scandinavian country that actually in some of their public governmental agencies limited the number of people in the agencies to 150 because you can never, and one of the things I read was like, as if you have no family, friends, and your work is your entire life. Sounds about right. Sounds pretty American.
It does. Well, to answer your question, Melanie, and she was not the only person, but I just thought her comment was interesting. Cecilia Maxson said, "It's interesting as I'm trying to list who my 150 are. I'm struck by the names of people I consider, and in quotations, good friends, but haven't spoken to them in months." So, like, how do you break that down to something that, I consider people I went to school with that I still, like, if we get together, it's just like you've never left. I would consider them a good friend, but I don't speak to them that often.
Well, the part that Dunbar's number goes to is these are maintained relationships. These aren't people that you show up once every 5 or 6 years. Like I have those friendships too. I have the people that, there's no Christmas card. There's no, we don't call each other once a week or once a month or once a year always. But whenever I see them, we're back to where we were, back to where we were before. And I consider them to be good friends.
Yeah.
But Dunbar's number really does go to really truly the number of people you can maintain a relationship with. So, this could even be like...
Is that like weekly or is this monthly or...
that's a good question. I don't know that one off the top of my head, but basically it's however he defined a maintained relationship. It could be even like, it could even be like the person that if you go to the same grocery store to check out, and you always look for the same person to check out with and you get to know them. I remember, in Nashville, I've talked more than a few times about Thai Phuket, right?
Ooh,
that I love eating at.
I'm hungry.
By the way, Melanie, when you're up there next week, are you gonna make a trip over to Thai Phuket?
Might have to. Yeah.
You've been there?
I have.
Yeah, you lived there.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Anyway, but
bring us a to-go box, please.
Okay.
Are you flying?
I am flying.
Don't put it in your luggage.
Yeah.
But I talked about the person who served us there and how he was one of while I was up there, I would say he was one of my 150 people, or one of the people that because I ate there at least once a week, generally speaking. And, he had an idea of what was going on in my life. And I had an idea of what was going on in his life. I wouldn't say that we were best friends, but anyway, those are, when you start thinking about the people that you run into on a daily basis and that you work with, family members that you maybe communicate with a couple times a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the things that you said something, I don't know if I've got this correct, but correct me if I'm wrong. All the things the church basically strives to be, as a collective, as a whole part, can be done maybe better in a small community than it can be in a church or a church service. Or is that considering church life or church service?
I would use the word church service for that.
Okay.
I would, and I wouldn't say. I think it's like saying what's better, a fork or a knife or a spoon. And it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. It's really hard. You like your fork, but it's really hard to eat soup with that.
I'll tip the bowl.
Yeah, I hear you.
I can't eat.
But
it's hard to eat. It's hard to cut steak with a spoon.
You're messing up the analogy.
Yeah, stop it.
Okay.
Put your pen down. Work with me.
Okay.
Remember where you get your paycheck, Randy. But you know what I'm saying, though. I don't like it when we start saying one thing is more important than another. Church service has a really important role that it plays. It's the one time in the week where we're all together as a family.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's important, and I don't want to take away from it. At the same time, I think that if you want community, if you want to have real intimacy, if you want to have relationships, that's going to need to be in a smaller group of people. Not that you don't have I think about some of the Easter services and Christmas services that we have here at Whole Life. I feel very close to the people that I'm worshiping with, and yet there's been a few times where I've had somebody walk up to me and say, "Oh, Ken, loved the service that I was at," and I was like, "Man, I didn't see you there. You were there?" And they were actually in person, and I just didn't. And so that's my point, is that when it comes to accountability, when it comes to compassion, can I say that? It is so easy to criticize people that you don't know their story. Mm-hmm. So easy to be like, "Oh, well, you shouldn't be doing this, and that." And you get to know that person and you're like, "Oh, they're doing pretty well for what's going on in their life." And, just today I got an email where a friend of mine was being attacked, I'll just say. And I haven't responded to the email yet, and I will. But the person who is coming after this person doesn't know them, doesn't know their heart, and just made some conjectures based on their life experience, which is all you can do. But they made some conjectures about this person that really bothered me because I know my friend.
Yeah.
I know who they are. I know what they care about and what they're about. And so I'm trying to think about the right way to respond to that email. And I guess my point is, it's easy when you don't know somebody to take them to task and to really give them a hard time. When you know somebody, you tend to have more compassion for them. You tend to care. And I'm not saying that we don't, there's still fights amongst close friends. We have, sharp words will get exchanged and things like that. But in a family, in a healthy family situation, those sharp words are going to pass, and that you're still family.
Yeah.
And that's what we really want to see come out of these small communities. We want to see groups of people, and might not agree with everything in that small community that you're a part of. You may see life different. You may, in this next election, you may vote for different people, but what we'd like to see is a group of people that just genuinely care about each other beyond those things, and that really encourage each other to grow spiritually, encourage each other to know when Randy isn't at church, to know why Randy isn't at church that week, because he's sick, because he's on vacation, because Ken said something that offended him, whatever. But, these things happen and people get offended. They don't come back. We don't notice. And they're like, nobody ever called me. And they're right. And we're like, And to me, the solution for that is having people who actually know and are like, "Hey, you hurt Randy's feelings, right?"
I didn't know.
And there may be times where I'm like, well, I'm sorry. Let me call Randy. I don't know that I can take back this because it's something I believe strongly. But there's other times where it's like, wow, that was a poor choice of words on my part. I could have done this a lot better. Let me call Randy and have that conversation. Even if it is something I don't want to take back, I can still call Randy and go, hey, I missed you at church. I would love to get this figured out. I'd love to repair our relationship. But that doesn't happen when there's no relationships going on, when there's nothing going on there. And so that's where I think small communities become such an important part. And I really do want to emphasize, because what I'll often hear from people is, well, this is why big churches are bad. That's why all churches should be small churches. Maybe they should all be home churches. Firstly, I've got nothing against a home church. I think that's great. I think it's biblical. There's a biblical model for that. I'd also suggest that there is a model for large church as well. Just look at the Israelites in the Old Testament. They are well over 1 million people as one large community, but then they get sectioned into tribes, clans, sub-clans, and families.
Tribes are large too.
The tribes are very large. And the point is that large groups have a place too. There's a reason why at the very beginning of the church sermon I talked about the different levels of organization in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and some of us may wonder whether all the levels are necessary, but there does need to be some organizational levels to cover what a smaller group of people can't do. The things that, for those of us who really love music, love a variety of music in a small church, it's really hard to have the music that you might enjoy, and that it's one person with a guitar, and it's not the same as seeing a large group, which is really fun.
I think that goes to your point that you made about the difference between a group and a community, because having attended many small churches in my life, just because you attend church every week with a group of people that is a very small group does not mean that you have community within that group.
Yeah, that's true.
Or that you find connection within that group, or you find people that you have things in common with. And so really, I think potentially a large church could provide more opportunity for community because of all the different people who are there.
Yeah, it can be a pretty rough thing, having been a part of small churches as well. It can be you can sometimes really struggle to find people you connect with in a that have some of the things in common that help to create a small community. And so that is one of the big advantages of a larger church, is that you have a lot more options of people to be in community with. And at the same time, I think one of the other huge advantages is that means there are more people with different opinions than you as well in a large group, which can be challenging in a good way.
Mm-hmm. I think it's easy to just be stale in a smaller church. Not to say you have to be, if the people there all agree that we're searching, we're looking for things, and we're okay to question, we're okay to challenge. But I haven't found that to be the case a lot in small churches, because you kind of get used to who everybody is, and then sometimes that's even worse, because then you'll have a tendency to project who you think that person is, and then you're almost putting words in their mouth, and I think that can be really uncomfortable too.
Well, and I want to make sure I say something. So if you haven't been listening, perk up now for just a second. I am not bashing. I don't want us to be bashing small churches, and I don't hear that happening. No. But I can also hear somebody listening to us and thinking, "Oh, clearly the three of us are at a large church. We like it here." So, if you're going to ask me what I prefer a church like this. But I would like to use that word preference. I think that small churches, medium churches, large, they all have their purpose and the things that they do incredibly well, and some people really, maybe even introverts prefer a smaller church, a more intimate group where they can really, really be engaged and have plenty to do. And other people are like, I'd like a bigger church where there's more things going on. I'd like a church that has more options and things like that. And so really, I think all of them serve their purpose, and I don't think one is better than the other. it really comes down to some preference. And I think small churches have advantages and disadvantages, and I think large churches have advantages and disadvantages. And what I really wanted to speak to this last week was one of the things that I think large churches have to be careful with, that it just becomes, well, just come to worship service and go home.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that doing just that accomplishes the reasons why people said they want to go to church.
Yeah.
Much less what I believe God created a church to be. But I mean, beyond, we can talk about what God wants, but I mean, look at the screen of all the things that people put up there. Sure. It's hard to experience a lot of those things if all you do is come to walk into the doors, say hi to a couple people, go sit in a seat. That's by the way, that's large church or small church, yeah. Right? And then go home and never have any other interaction during the rest of the week or on the rest of the Sabbath or whatever.
Well, and I think the challenge is the same. I mean, my comments were more from having been comparatively. I mean, the church I grew up in was the largest church in the state, but compared to Whole Life or Forest Lake or something else here in the Orlando area.
Compared to Forest Lake, we're small.
Well, we're small, right. So, but I think small community can happen sometimes easier in a small church. It might be an advantage that they have versus us, where you're like, it's frustrating some weeks when you're like, hey, you coming to church this week? Yeah, I'll be there. Which service are you coming to? And then can you catch them in between the time that they are hitting the elevator, taking their kids here or there, and you just want to put air tags on everyone so you can find them when you want them.
Yeah.
So sometimes there's definitely a challenge. I think that and again, depending whether you're an introvert, I mean, Heather grew up in a church where her dad was her Sabbath school teacher. I think he was the head elder and a deacon
and the Pathfinder director.
Right. There was like
also the head deaconess. It's like all of those things.
If there was like 13 people, little Gillette, Wisconsin, a little town. If they had 13 or 14 people, it was like, whew, man, church was packed today, right? So I think it's all what you make of it too. I think there's that responsibility on all of us, not just church staff, but for those of us that just that attend and call Whole Life or whatever church home.
Well, I will say this for small churches, and that is when you're with a very small group of people, it can be character building because you can't avoid the person who disagrees with you. Whereas in a larger church, you can kind of just hang out with the people. Yeah. But in a small church, you definitely have to. Your characters polish each other. I'll put it that way. If you're in a situation where you have to be together and work together.
Well, and I did really appreciate, and I didn't think about it last night, but during the message you were talking about Numbers, the book of Numbers in the Old Testament. And last night, Heather was working, and Emily's like, Dad, I'm tired. I want to go to bed. She's like, but you got to read stories. And I'm like, okay, well, where are you and Mom in the Bible? Because we usually read stories. They read the Bible. And so she counts on me for stories, counts on Mom for Bible, but she wanted the Bible last night. So Heather's like, yeah, we're in Leviticus. Maybe we should just skip that because it's been rough sledding. And so I'm like, well, where do you want me to start?
I love Leviticus. I don't know what everybody's problem with that book is.
And so I said, where do you want me to start? So, maybe tomorrow night, if it's back to you, then And she's like, well, start in Numbers. So I started last night. Emmy and I went through Numbers 1 and 2 in the Message. Now, maybe the Message I feel is like a little slicker, get you through a little bit easier. And we did the first 2 chapters, but she was absolutely fascinated by the numbers. Like this, Gad had of the age of over 20 that were fighting, that were able to fight, and that was 670,000 when you get all of them added together and going through. And she kept repeating the numbers over and over again, and we had a blast reading. So I don't know, maybe Leviticus is your kryptonite, but I thought Numbers was pretty interesting last night.
Nice.
For 2 chapters.
Well, I'm glad that I highlighted it in the sermon then.
That's it. So I was just like, hey, this isn't so bad. We can make it.
Or at least during first service I did.
If you go to wholelife.church/media, that will be the first service will be the one that you get to watch because we're good that way. So at the end of the day, we're going to get to a couple of questions, but reframe what a the difference, or why the distinction, I think, is what I heard the most. Why the distinction between something we've all heard of, we've grown up with, if we've been in a church environment, even if it's not Adventism, everyone knows small groups. Yeah. Small groups is a thing. And so it's like, okay, well, are we just calling it small communities to be, some marketing ploy? Is this really something that we are sold on?
Yes, and.
Oh, I like it.
Sometimes when you've grown up with something and you're used to something, you forget the point. And I feel like small groups, the word group does not, to me, communicate intimacy. When I hear the word group, I think of medical group, which that's nice. I think about maybe like an Alcoholics Anonymous, maybe, but not even really that so much. I think it's really important for us to understand what we're trying to accomplish with what we're doing. And I feel like the word community much better conveys what we're trying to accomplish, because if you have a small group that plays games, to me that says something different than a small community that plays games. A group that plays games, that's all they do. That's what it's about. We get together because we like doing tabletop games. And what we really want to communicate here at Whole Life to our family is that when you're a part of this, you're a part of a community. So if you're playing board games, and I just like using that one because I know the Maxons listen here. But if you're playing games, it's not simply about playing board games. It's also about being a part of a community. And that means caring about what's going on in each other's lives. It means noticing when the people in your community are at church or not at church. It means noticing if they don't come to one of the events. It means being present in their lives and just genuinely caring. And with a group doesn't do that. A group is just a group of people that get together, they do what they came to do, and then they're done. A community is a group of people that, I think of the word community, that they're in community, they are together, they are a part of something that goes beyond one activity.
Well, it communicates the intentionality, I think, a little bit more. When you say I'm part of a community, that seems like a...
So is that why you said all communities are spiritual? Meaning that there's a spiritual aspect to what we're intending these communities to be versus, like you said, a group who just happens to get together?
Yeah. In the case of what we're creating, when we talk about small communities at Whole Life, all small communities at Whole Life are spiritual. Whether they're studying the Bible or doing cycling. What we want you to do is to actually care about each other's spiritual life. How are you doing? It doesn't necessarily even mean that they have to have a devotion at the beginning of every get together. But it means that there is an understanding that we don't divide the secular and the spiritual, that what we're doing, and that's, again, I think another part of that community word versus group word. When you have a small group, a small cycling group, then that's what you're doing. You're cycling. And I think that a lot of times when you start talking about small groups in churches and you say, well, here's our Bible study small groups, and then here's our, our secular type activities like and so it's like, well, if I'm a part of the cycling, I probably ought to join also a Bible study one as well, because I'm not going to, that's just going to be,
that's where I'm going to get my spiritual.
And what I would love to think is that when we have small communities at Whole Life, let's go ahead and you started a neighborhood small community in your community. You're the only person from Whole Life that's doing it, and you're a part of that. I don't think that you necessarily need to say, hey, I'm doing this because I'm a part of the Whole Life Church and you're a small community that I'm. No, it's, hey, I'm going to go ahead and intentionally be a part of my neighborhood by creating this community. And then I'm going to live in a way that maybe those neighbors will say, hey, I noticed something different. Where do you go to church? What are you up to? I noticed that every Saturday morning you leave your house kind of a little bit earlier than I expect people to leave on a Saturday. What's up with that? And then, you don't have to preach a sermon. You just, I'm part of the Whole Life Church over, North Orange Avenue, and just love that place that, changed my life, made my life better, whatever. And then let people make up their minds from there. But to kind of try to say, well, this is spiritual, this isn't, I think that's not helpful. And we want everything that we do to have God infused through all of it.
I like.
It's about being whole and about having an integrated life, and not a life that's separated into different compartments.
And I think that's, and just in from my experience, I think that's easier as an idea to understand in maybe a larger group. In a smaller group, if it's a compartmentalized, this is secular and this is spiritual, unless somebody comes into that space and shows what it looks like when, like, wait, that doesn't seem like something we should be doing at this time, because it doesn't seem spiritual, it doesn't seem to match. And someone says, oh, well, they explain their reason, or just their life in general gives you that vibe. That was a big thing moving here, when the first time someone was like, well, why I do this? Of course, it's just, then here's why. And I was like, oh, okay. But that was totally out of our realm. And until you see somebody model it with intentionality, it may be hard to swallow or see another side. It doesn't even mean that you're necessarily going to go to that side, but you can also appreciate someone else living differently, and also realizing that they love Jesus just like you do. And I think that's super important.
And I think if people are thinking about being a part of a small group or a small community, and I'm having to change my lexicon there too, is because I've said it all my life. But if you're if you're trying to be a part of a small community, give it a shot. Go in there and be what you want it to be. I don't know if that makes sense. And then the other part is, if you feel like maybe you'd like to be leading a small group or a small community and you're not sure how to do it, you're like, I don't get what this infusing God and all this stuff is. The great thing is Freud and his team are going to be doing training. So there's all kinds of opportunity. If you have an inkling that you feel like God is asking you to do this, then I hope that you'll contact Freud and say, hey, I'd like to do some training and learn about it. I really truly believe that in a church our size, that we could be seeing, that 70 to 100 small communities would not be like too many. I love the idea, and that's one of the things I love about it, is that, again, in a church this size, you can have a lot of different small communities with a lot of different. You can have the people that are interested in collecting stamps with their small community. You can have the people that are interested in the book of Jeremiah. Whatever, whatever numbers that you want to, or numbers. Yeah, there you go. It's
Ken's Leviticus group.
Ken's Leviticus group.
Sign up. There's a waiting list.
I'm honestly more of a Judges kind of guy. So,
oh man, I think I recommended a book once. Maybe I'll start a group on that.
On that one book.
On that one book.
Yeah,
Maybe people would like to read that book, since I did that. Well, here's the very cool thing is, last week, Freud and his team, this wasn't last week, but it kind of all came to a culmination before we met for church this week. The wholelife.church/communities, you'll find that in the show notes today. You can click on that. And the beautiful part is, take the survey. This was part of what we did during the service, and that will let us know what you're looking for, what your interests are, and there can be, to your point, Ken, there could be 5 cooking classes. There could be someone that's like, look, I only do baking. Someone else could be cooking. Somebody else could be cooking Brazilian food. Or
somebody could do vegan food. Somebody could do good food. There's all kinds of different options.
My goodness.
Wow. He looked right at Melanie. He's like, so we'll be doing good food. Wow. Okay. And so
just because you saw my breakfast doesn't mean you need to make fun of me.
No. I quit making fun as soon as I knew that was like a family tradition, because,
not all family traditions are good ones, though. Can we just be honest about that? There's some things that probably ought to end.
There was a dish, you can ask my mom. She'll be here in a couple of weeks. You can ask her what the recipe is for goulash magushi.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I think you might like it because it sounds. If I remember right, it might be.
That's actually the name I would have given Melanie's dish if I had to come up.
Okay. So the official name for it is tofu Italian. You take tofu and you squish it all up and you put spaghetti sauce on it and sliced olives, and then if you put it on toast, it's actually pretty good.
Now, I think
this is breakfast, though. I mean, like if you'd been eating it tonight, I would have left you alone a little bit more. But breakfast,
thus the toast, which I did not actually bring the toast.
There was no toast. So.
I think there should have been green olives in there too, for just a little salt.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I've had that before, and it is very good.
I bet. I'm going to try this one of these days.
There you go.
And I'll see if I can figure out. The goulash magashi. Okay. Also, on the wholelife.church/communities, you're going to find there's a survey there. And there's also, like, if you already know what your group is, like, this is something you've been thinking about, and you're like, oh, man, I know what my group is.
Your community?
Yeah. Fill out. Group. Sorry. Here. That's Randy hitting himself with his notes.
We're going to have a swear jar that every time someone says small group, they have to put money in it.
All right, we're going to have to get one of those.
Oh, man. Can you give us like a couple weeks?
It's going to get expensive.
A grace period.
Oh, my goodness. Hard. So if you know what your small community is, there is a form on that page, and that form will always be on the page just for everyone. But you're going to notice that the page is going to change in the near future. This was just to get all the information as quickly as we could, but that will be there. So if you know what it is, put it down, and if it'll even ask you, do you need a little help? And Freud will gladly go, hey, they need help. Let's go ahead and help them figure this out. Lastly, here. So person of the church, that is the difference between groups and communities. So we covered that one.
All right.
Anonymous asked, do you think that maybe one of the issues in church participation today is the issue that many of us came to church as consumers rather than contributors?
Yeah, we talked about that during one of the response time. And again, I don't want to judge people's hearts. I don't want to say, this person's here to consume. I think that there are people that are kind of have a consumer mentality? Of course, I'm sure. I think other people sometimes are just so completely worn out from being in a church and doing so much that they just sometimes just need a break from that. But I also think that in our society in general, we're becoming more and more disconnected. It just feels like people don't know the neighbors around them like they used to. I'm guilty of that. I feel like we, just as a general society, are becoming less and less connected with others, and I think it's one of the reasons why we see some of the major depression, loneliness, anxiety issues that we see in our society today. And so, rather than, I would just encourage people check out the small communities and give it a go and see if it makes a difference for you.
Yeah. Excuse me. I want to get to a couple other comments and then one other one that I think really just kind of wraps it up. Philip Burks, who was, you'll see Philip up front every so often, and he was a staff member here for a time, and he said anyone who can maintain 150 relationships doesn't have small children. The mere thought of this overwhelms this introvert.
I'm pretty sure one of Dunbar's laws of his number was that children count as 50.
Oh wow, that might work then. And
however, I will have to say, sorry, Phil, if I'm calling you out, but Phil and a small community of musicians got together and did music for the Florida Conference camp meeting a week or so ago, and that's not the first time that they've done a special event like this. So there are all kinds of different small communities that can happen even if you have children.
See, look at that look at her getting small communities right the first time. Doggone, that's why she wants the jar. She's got this down, and the rest of us.
It will be on my desk.
And, T. Cinco, one of our favorites, said, I do think some people require more relationships than others. As an introvert, I'm content and delighted with a small group of people. So she's still cool with the group. There is safety in vulnerability. I'm not comfortable with that in a large group, but that's just me. So we hear you, introverts. That's, not saying that a small community could fit that bill as well. And Aaron asked, are there going to be virtual small community options?
We're definitely going there.
Definitely. Yeah. No, stay tuned because there's more to come.
But the other part that I would say, that was Aaron who asked that?
Aaron, yep.
The other thing I would say, Aaron, is we would love to talk to you about creating small communities in the community that you live in.
Yes.
So, yeah, we'll look at virtual opportunities as well. But we're really interested in exploring how we can create people in your area that you
I hope you can hear him smiling, Aaron, because the smile.
Did you just say create people in your community? I feel like that's a different thing.
If I said that,
we're not saying. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
I don't think you can create people, but if you can create small communities in your
you can with intentionality, but that's totally up to you.
Geographical location.
Yeah, that's totally up to you. All right, and here's one where in different places in the chat, people were asking like, why now? Why this switch? And I know we've answered what's the difference between a small group and small community. But this is really, and to me, part of what we've already been trying to do with the culture and the way we approach things here at Whole Life. And I resonated with Joe because this is Joe who worships with us twice every single week. And Joe's story, at least, I don't know Joe's complete story, but I resonate with this. This was me. Well, he apparently, he said, when I left the church, nobody came to see me. Like nobody reached out. I was actually kicked out, but nobody came to see me either. So I feel like we resonate. And Joe says, he followed up by saying, I still don't go to church, but I watch online. And Aaron goes, you go to church with us, Joe, with the big smiley face. And he said, yes, I do, Aaron. Thank you for saying that. So right there in the middle of church, as we're discussing this topic, we're finding small community. And I think that's the difference between a small group, what Ken has been saying, and a small community. Small group just says, well, we're here to chat, but we're here to be surface level. We're just here to watch church. We don't have to get into each other's business. We don't have to support each other necessarily. We're not going to go out of our way. And so Aaron and Joe, that was a great that tugged at my heartstrings. I felt that one on Sabbath morning when we were actually watching it happen in real time, and it's still today. So I think we've covered. I think that was a nice way to wrap up. I think the difference in the two. Next week, it is May already. Come on.
Yeah.
Wow.
May 4th. That means Mother's Day is right around the corner, people. So just as a heads up, I mean.
Ooh, good call.
Just guys, don't mess it up. And girls, for that matter, just don't mess it up. Mom, don't
let your mama know you love them.
That's it. And get started early because I mean, even with Prime, they tease you with the one that you really want, and that one says Prime until you click on it, and then it's not Prime, and you ordered it and it comes late when you could have spent an extra $82 and gotten it there on time.
I feel like this is not hypothetical.
I feel like now we're having a therapy session.
I'm just saying it could happen to you. I'm not going to out anybody as to who screwed up and doesn't read the shipping instructions correctly from time to time. Just saying, don't screw it up. And you've been warned. The art of worship. What? So this is new series.
New series
starts this week, and we start with what?
Drama.
Bum, bum, bum.
That's where it always begins.
Drama in the church.
Drama in the church. So is this the good kind of drama in the church? I'm assuming.
Depending on who you talk to.
Well,
I guess you'll have to show up and find out,
I was
Andy.
going to say, if that's in line, in person, online, in line, on person, don't be on person. Get your own chair.
I've messed you up.
That's right. Be online or in person. Do it that way. That sounds better. And what else? I feel like we're missing something. Is there something else coming up that I forgot?
Isn't there a concert?
We do have a concert this weekend. Yeah, yes. Gail Murphy is going to join us for church, both services, and then she's going to have a special concert at 6:30 p.m. in the worship center.
6:30 p.m. in the worship center.
Yes.
You'll find out more of that as you listen to this. We'll have already there's already a post heading out to social media to give you the details on that, as Albert has already put those out. He's excited. I'm excited. It's always good when Gail worships with us. And
everybody's excited. This is going to be good. You don't want to miss this.
This is like when the piano really gets a workout. I mean, it just really becomes center, and like she uses every ounce that thing has to offer.
That's
and I love
right.
it. So that's when you know you've been worshiping in that way. So I guess that's it. Mother's Day, Gail Murphy, The Art of Worship, new series. And now you know the small communities. Swipe up, click on it, find out, and take the survey. Take the survey, if nothing else. Let your voice be heard. Let us know what you're looking for. And if you know what it is, then fill out the form. And
what time is the concert Saturday night?
6:30.
6:30.
6:30 p.m.
And I don't know if that's going to be streamed or not.
Yeah, that's a good question.
That's a good question.
I don't know that has been decided yet.
Well, sometimes you run into copyright and all that fun stuff, and then you get taken down. So we'll have to talk to the people that want to see if we can sneak past the censors and make it through for a whole concert. So, okay, that's going to do it for this week, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all next week.